If the U.S. leaves the Sahel tonight, what will happen by morning? That question wasn't asked by an analyst in Washington or a journalist in Paris. It was whispered by a general inside a closed-door Pentagon briefing on the digital map in front of him. A small country glowed red, Burkina Faso, not because of war, but because of what it just signed. In the early hours of September 6, 2025, a new axis was born, quietly, without press conferences, but loud enough to rattle the walls of Western diplomacy. Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, and Iran. Yes, Iran. And this wasn't just another arms shipment or joint training program. This was a four-tiered strategic pact. Radar systems, drones, uranium mining, crypto finance bypassing SWIFT, and a shared military doctrine. At the center stood Captain Ibrahim Traoré, flanked not by French advisors or IMF officials, but by Iranian generals, Russian envoys, and economic delegates from Mali and Niger. When the cameras finally rolled, Traoré said just 8 words: "We are not the renters of our land." That sentence echoed all the way to Brussels. The agreement includes a 25-year uranium contract, the construction of a regional electronic warfare center, and the rollout of a Sahel-based digital currency backed by resource wealth, not dollars. At that very moment, French diplomats in West Africa were summoned back to Paris. U.S. intelligence triggered DEFCON-level encryption on all communications in the region. Tel Aviv issued a classified regional alert, because this wasn't just geopolitics. This was rebellion in real time. What happens when a landlocked country declares financial and military independence not through protest, but through precision partnerships? What happens when Sahel radar screens no longer report to NATO satellites? And if Iran now has eyes in the heart of Africa, whose secrets are no longer secret? This is not the future the West prepared for. This is the nightmare they can't wake up from. And it's only just beginning. The deal signed before sunrise. What happens when silence becomes strategy? On the morning of September 6, 2025, before the sun rose over Ouagadougou, a convoy of unmarked military vehicles rolled into the city center. No ceremony, no Western media, no press access. But inside a bulletproof glass building, something unprecedented in modern African history was taking place. Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and Iran signed a 4-tier strategic alliance, a deal security analysts in the West would soon label the Sahel Nightmare. Each tier of the pact rewrote a part of the global order. 1. Military tier, asymmetric retaliation. Iran pledged to deploy cross-border radar systems, electronic warfare capabilities to jam NATO satellite feeds, and to train AES forces in offensive drone tactics. A joint operations center is being built in the tri-border zone, with Iranian officers providing high-level combat training. 2. Energy tier, uranium sovereignty. A $14 billion deal was signed with Iran and a Russian mining firm to jointly extract, refine, and export uranium directly from the Annada and Falaguntu regions, zones previously under quiet French control for decades. No Areva, no Paris, no CFA franc. 3. Economic tier, Afro-solid digital currency. A new digital currency, asset-backed by real mineral wealth, will circulate within AES countries, developed with support from Iranian and Russian blockchain engineers. Afro-solid bypasses the SWIFT system entirely, stripping the U.S. of transactional visibility. 4. Technology tier, the AES Iran Intelligence Hub. An AI and intelligence analysis center will open in Ouagadougou, staffed by Iranian specialists to track terror threats and simulate asymmetric conflict responses. Notably, The entire system is disconnected from the global internet. When the pact went public, much of the world thought it was disinformation. French media remained silent for 18 hours. Washington issued no immediate statement, a rare move. But behind the scenes, the panic was real. A classified DGSE memo sent to the Élysée Palace stated bluntly, if this alliance functions for 12 months, French influence in West Africa will collapse within 5 years. The U.S. moved quickly. 3 American defense firms were barred from engaging with Burkina Faso-linked partners. A $1.2 billion World Bank package was frozen. The IMF suspended debt restructuring talks with Niger. Silent sanctions began spreading. But the most powerful weapon in this alliance was not uranium, drones, or crypto. It was silence. Silence from the people. No protests. No infighting. Only drums in Ouaga's main square, chanting, "We are no longer afraid." Traoré spoke little. But he knew exactly what he was risking, not just the survival of Burkina Faso, but a larger question. If a small landlocked nation can build defense, finance, and intelligence systems without the West, then why are others still kneeling? So, what do you think? Was this deal a reckless gamble, or the first real declaration of independence in the 21st century? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Which side are you on? The panic after the pact, when silence ended. The screams began. At 3:42 a.m., just hours after the Ouagadougou agreement was signed, French satellites detected an encrypted drone signal pulsing from the Sahel Triangle. It was not American, it was not Russian, it was Iranian, and it was live. Within minutes, military attachés in Paris, Washington, and Tel Aviv began making calls, panic layered beneath professionalism. One Western official said bluntly, "This is not a regional shift. This is a tectonic rupture." By dawn, the world had changed. France reacted first. President Macron held an emergency press conference calling the AES-Iran pact a direct threat to European security interests. Without naming Traoré, he accused certain regimes of opening their doors to known global destabilizers. French troops previously stationed in Niger were placed on standby. A shipment of Areva uranium from West Africa was abruptly canceled. But behind the rhetoric, the fear was more specific. If Iran could build radar on Sahel soil, then who was watching French airspace from below? The United States followed. The Pentagon issued a region-wide alert. AFRICOM froze all training exercises with Burkina Faso and neighboring AES states. A covert cyber task force, rumored to operate from Virginia, was redirected to monitor all digital traffic emerging from Ouagadougou's new intelligence center. The State Department quietly labeled Burkina Faso a strategic disruptor, and then came the first crack. On September 8th, just 2 days after the pact, an explosion rocked a military vehicle in northern Burkina Faso. The blast killed 2 junior officers. The government called it terrorism, but internal sources hinted something else, a foreign signal hijack. Unverified intercepts later linked the detonation to a scrambled transmission traced back to a European military satellite. No nation claimed responsibility, but silence speaks loudest when the guilty are well-dressed. Israel took its own path. Without waiting for broader Western consensus, Mossad agents were allegedly tasked with gathering intelligence on Iranian assets in the Sahel. A former Israeli official warned on Channel 13 News, "We cannot allow Iran to establish a forward radar base 2 hours from the Mediterranean." But the street didn't care about diplomacy. In Bamako, thousands marched, chanting "Down with the puppets." In Niamey, local radio played speeches by Traoré on loop. And in Ouagadougou, Someone spray-painted on the French Cultural Center. Your museums are full of our stolen art. Now your embassies fear our ideas. No shots had been fired, no sanctions formally enacted, but the psychological line had been crossed. The West believed that control was a matter of aid, bases, and quiet deals, but they never prepared for a resistance born of coordination, not confrontation, no shouting, no threats, just precision moves. And now, a growing fear that Burkina Faso's model might spread. Mali's prime minister tweeted, "The world calls it dangerous. We call it overdue." Guinea's finance minister proposed reviewing all foreign resource contracts. Chad's opposition party demanded an emergency debate on joining the AES bloc. Sudan's Transitional Council requested technical information on Afrosolid. Traoré didn't have to campaign. His silence was speaking for him. So now the real question for the West is not how to stop Traoré, but how many Traorés are already watching, waiting, preparing. The people rose. Without shouting, no one can steal back what we reclaimed with our minds. Within 3 weeks of the signing ceremony, the numbers began to shift, but not on Western stock markets, not in Gallup polls. The changes unfolded at market stalls, hospitals, classrooms, places ordinary Burkinabe had long considered irrelevant to politics. In the town of Kaya, a team of Iranian technicians and Burkinabe students were installing the 4th solar station, jointly funded by Iran and AES. A year ago, the area ran on diesel imported from Côte d'Ivoire. Today, they generate 18 hours of daily power on their own. In Dori, a group of Malian engineers trained under an Iranian model expanded the underground water filtration system funded by uranium revenue. The numbers spoke clearly. 9.6 million reinvested into infrastructure just 2 weeks after the deal was signed. A school in Banfora received its first batch of computers. No USAID logos, no funded by the EU plaques. Only a message printed in the local language. This is our money. The AES governments established a $3 billion sovereign emergency fund, sourced entirely from mining and military logistics revenue. No Swiss banks, no IMF oversight. It was used to purchase medical equipment from Iran and India, provide technical scholarships for AES students to study in Tehran, maintain the Ouaga-Bamako-Niamey highway without European PPPs. From local mayors to national ministries, the new system ran as if this country had never been dependent. Of course, not everything was smooth. Prices rose temporarily, unemployment hadn't dropped meaningfully, and segments of the old elite worried about losing touch with the world. But when asked, a truck driver in Bobo Dioulasso said simply, "I'd rather be poor in freedom than rich by permission." At schools, kids did math with real data. If a uranium mine earns $42 million per quarter and 8% goes to education, then economics was no longer theory. It was a story they were writing in real time. In politics, the shift was even more striking. Within 30 days, 3 opposition parties announced mergers into the AES rebuilding movement. A former MP who once denounced the Iran alliance now served on the Education Committee, saying, "For the first time, I was invited, not excluded." And yet, the part Western observers struggled to understand was this: why was there no crackdown? No one was jailed for dissent. No one was fired for opposing the deal. Even Western journalists were allowed into Burkina Faso. Just no one believed them anymore. Traoré's greatest strength wasn't firepower or propaganda. It was something far more potent. People had begun to see themselves as part of what they once feared: government. So, if one nation can reclaim sovereignty without repression, without war, without foreign aid, How many others are simply waiting for someone to say yes before they rise? When the world blinks first, the greatest threat is not the missile, it's the message. Washington didn't blink immediately, but it flinched hard. On September 17th, in a classified Senate Armed Services Committee hearing, a U.S. general made a chilling statement: "We've lost radar control of Central Africa." The statement wasn't about aircraft, it was about narrative. The Pentagon's internal analysis didn't just warn about Iranian drones or Russian trainers. It focused on what Burkina Faso had built: an independent intelligence hub, a sovereign energy stream, a digitally firewalled economy, a public that wasn't protesting but participating. In diplomatic cables later leaked by whistleblowers, U.S. diplomats described Burkina Faso's model not as an outlier, but a template. One cable read, "This is not another rogue state. This is an organized exit from the Western order." France, meanwhile, entered damage control mode. Paris withdrew remaining diplomatic staff from Mali and reduced its footprint in Niger. French state TV aired a week-long special series titled "The New Darkness: Iran's Influence in Africa." But even conservative viewers sensed desperation. One segment interviewed a Burkina Faso student who calmly said, "We are not choosing Iran. We are choosing ourselves." Elsewhere, the global chessboard began shifting. China moved with caution. While not endorsing the AES-Iran pact, Beijing offered to facilitate infrastructure integration. Analysts saw this as a signal. China wants in, but without confrontation. India made a bolder play. Its foreign minister flew to Bamako and proposed a trilateral development bank for AES nations, offering digital infrastructure deals that didn't require dollar loans. Turkey offered drones. Russia sent mining technicians. But the U.S. remained frozen, caught between two dangers: escalate and risk turning Burkina Faso into another global battleground. Do nothing and watch the model spread. In the background, voices inside Washington began to shift, not in support, but in recognition. One think tank wrote, "If we don't engage the Traorés of the world early, we'll be negotiating with them late." At the UN, Burkina Faso's delegate gave a quiet but devastating speech. "You asked us for stability. Now that we have it, on our own terms, you call it radicalization. The truth is, your concern was never stability. It was obedience." No mic drop, no applause, just stunned silence. And the growing realization that the old game, the one built on loans, bases, and broken promises, was finally and fatally being rewritten. So ask yourself, if even the U.S. in the intelligence community is afraid of an idea, what happens when that idea finds a microphone in every corner of the global South? The blueprint for the next empire. They thought we were building a bunker. We were building a blueprint. The AES-Iran pact was never just about drones or uranium. It was a signal, broadcast not through cables, but through consequences. And the world, finally, is starting to decode it. South Africa is now reviewing its foreign-based policy. Namibia has frozen new mining licenses to Western companies pending sovereignty audits. Zimbabwe's central bank announced plans to digitize its gold-backed currency and reached out to Ouagadougou for consultation. Ethiopia, once skeptical, just sent a trade delegation to Niamey. This is not diplomacy. This is continental calibration. Burkina Faso no longer sees itself as a rebel. It sees itself as a template, an operating system for resource-rich nations that refuse to be client states. A mirror held up to the global South, asking a simple, devastating question. If we could break the chain, what's stopping you? But the road ahead is not without landmines. cyber sabotage will increase. Covert operations will intensify. There will be assassinations cloaked as accidents. There will be whispers of regime change, humanitarian pretexts, destabilization campaigns dressed as diplomacy. But Traoré's strategy is not defense, it's scale. Already, whispers inside the AES point toward something bigger: a transcontinental resource union, a shared cybersecurity defense grid, a unified gold-uranium digital basket currency. Not fantasy. Framework. Drawn, debated, and drafted behind closed doors. What the West dismissed as noise is becoming the draft of a new world order, not written in Geneva or Brussels, but in Bamako, Niamey, and Ouagadougou. So now the world must decide, will it keep clinging to a system built on control, debt, and extraction, or finally confront a new model where value stays where it's born? What if Africa refuses permission forever? If they can't stop the signal, can they stop the spark? When Ibrahim Traoré stepped back from the table, the ink still drying on the pact with India, and the dust still settling from the alliance with Iran, he didn't make a speech. He didn't need to. Because across Africa, the words were already echoing. We don't need permission anymore. Not from Paris. Not from Washington. Not even from history. For centuries, the continent was told to wait. Wait for reform. Wait for aid. Wait for approval. But the 21st century doesn't belong to those who wait. It belongs to those who write. And Burkina Faso is writing in ink that cannot be erased. Contracts, code, and conviction. But here's the truth most people cannot admit. This was never about Burkina Faso. It was about the idea that a small, landlocked, once impoverished nation could tear out the script and write its own. That's what truly terrifies the West. Not drones, not uranium, but example. Because if the world sees Traoré succeed, if young leaders from Chad to Chile realize they don't need Paris, Washington, or Brussels, then the era of Western permission collapses overnight. And then the questions come, fast and dangerous. What happens when Africa doesn't ask anymore? What happens when Asia stops waiting for investment terms? What happens when Latin America flips the IMF the finger? What happens when the global South unites, not in anger, but in architecture? When history is no longer something done to them, but something they engineer. So here's the question I leave with you. Are we witnessing the rebirth of African sovereignty or the beginning of global insubordination? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this shook something in you, share it. Because they can't suppress the truth if enough of us are watching. Africa is no longer waiting. Now the world is.